Hey Kat, nice to see you and thanks for taking the time.
Hey Laura, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, of course. So of course I want to talk a little bit more about, your journey with us as one of our alumni, obviously, and how you've kind of utilized the program and leveraged the program to continue on with one of our partner fungi working there. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about, your journey. Like when did you join the program? What did you do with us? Let's put that as a start.
Yeah, so I joined ArtBound Initiative around, I would say, like March of 2024. And I decided it was time to jump into the professional world. I took a little bit of time after post grad, and I felt like that kind of gave me a little bit of a setback just because you always get this idea in your head of being like, oh, everybody needs to go straight from, college to the industry. But I don't really think that's true. I think ArtBound definitely helped me realize that there's a bunch of opportunities that are available to me no matter what point I am in my journey post grad. And so I joined in March of 2024 and I ended up being placed in a internship or two internships, one with big shoulders and then one with fungi around June to August of 2024. I get on the track to be like a creative director, copywriter, work in film and the production industry. So yeah, that's what I did with Artbound. And it was really helpful to be able to have that extra boost because especially now, like the artistic industries are so difficult to break into. Mhm.
Yes, it's not easy, but I love what you said about like that idea that I think every student has kind of coming out thinking like, oh, I'm going to graduate and have everything figured out in like 5 minutes and I'm going to have like my career on track,
Yeah.
which is, couldn't be further away from the truth in many cases, right? I mean, everybody has different journeys. How did you remember how you found out about us? How was it through your university? Was it outside of that?
Well, honestly, I found you guys through a Google search and
Okay.
I did a ton of like reading about you guys. Honestly, like past alumni things. I found you guys like some articles like about you guys on Reddit and I felt like I was like, okay, well they must be pretty amicable if like people are saying great things about them. So I never found anything about you guys that was like anything but like a glowing review. So that was definitely like a key to me where I was like, okay, this sounds great. And you guys have a great like LinkedIn and social presence as well, which I really appreciated. But yeah, I found you guys just through a simple Google search. I was at a time where I was like, I'm ready to jump in. So I want to find something that really helps accelerate me.
I love that. I love that. And obviously I'm really happy that you did because that set you up. So I think that's a question that a lot of people are asking, right? I think a lot of people that join our program are obviously very eager, specifically when they graduated, they're very eager to kind of figure out how they can utilize that internship to, get something that's, a little bit more robust, a position, whether it's going to be freelance, full-time, part-time, but something that's basically like, starting to pay the bills and really getting into the industry. How did that transition happen for you? So obviously you interned with both Big Shoulders, which we love, and Fungi as well, which we love, and you ended up actually continuing with Fungi. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I was initially supposed to be an intern from August to through October. After I helped them plan their annual Halloween party, I knew that they were looking for somebody a little bit more permanent, not necessarily full time. And then I like to say that I stuck around long enough for them to have to give me a full time position because I feel like that's sort of what happened. So I went from being just an intern to being their part time social media manager. And then I ended up working very heavily with them on their podcast, which doesn't have as much to do with social media as I was already doing, but it was a really, really big chunk of their internal content that they produce and it gave me a lot of responsibility and it gave me a good opportunity to be able to kind of interact with the rest of the people who were in the company and it gave me a kind of my foot in the door, I would say, to be able to take on bigger projects. And I think it gave me a lot better of, I guess, a grasp on what exactly the work that they did there and how they kind of operated because when you think about companies it's like the most important thing to them is like processes,
Yeah.
so that's it's embedded in their culture and it's very embedded in like the work that they do, especially a creative agency, what their process is. And so being able to do their podcast, it gave me a great opportunity to learn their process and then that kind of led to being initially like inherently a full-time employee because
Amazing.
things in companies are always changing. So it's like I would recommend to anybody who was in my position that I was in to say, hey, just take the bigger projects that you maybe don't know a lot about and turn that into something more because I mean, something's going to change at some point. So it's all about kind of a waiting game when it comes to that stuff.
It is a bit of a waiting game. And obviously, of course, I always talk about the fact that recruitment is obviously stars aligning, right? It's got to do with your performance, but also is there a budget, for you? Is there an opening? Is the opening related to your skill set? And like, does it make sense, right? So I think there's obviously a lot of variables that are into play. But would you say, like, if you had a couple of advice, obviously for a lot of our current participants and some fresh grads out there that are trying to leverage those opportunities right now, try to turn them into something that's more full-time?
I would say utilizing your soft skills is like the best way to set yourself apart from other people. When I first came into working in the industry, I was so freaked out and so nervous about thinking, oh, well, I have to be able to do the job correctly and I have to do it to the best of my ability or to the best of what they would want to see. But I don't necessarily think that's true because I think that when you come into the industry as an intern, especially, nobody is really expecting you to have that prior knowledge. So it's like, don't rely on what you don't know. Rely on like the soft skills that make you a great intern and a great employee, and not even just that, like a great person. One thing that I felt like I really excelled in at Fungi was like accentuating those soft skills. So it's like someone who's willing to take on tasks that they maybe aren't usually doing at like a normal job, It's like, I think one time I broke down like an entire, like we got this like big, gigantic, like meeting booth and we had like this giant wooden box like sitting out in the alley and I just went and I broke it down for them just because there was nobody else to do it. So it's just like taking on things that like you don't think that you necessarily would do for that job because it makes like the lives of the people around you a lot easier. Having a great attitude, being really nimble, being willing to change plans at the last minute. I think it's a really great exercise in just learning about like the industry and life in general. But yeah, that's what I would tell anybody that's going into the industry for the first time is just like rely on the skills that you already have, and then be open to learning new ones too.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying because it's true that when you're arriving as a junior and an intern, obviously you don't have like, you don't arrive with like a crazy amount of skills to kind of sell, right? Like what you have is the soft skills and is your, willingness and ability to kind of be like, hey, I'm on it. Like, what can I do for you? And how else can I help? And I like what you said about like making people's life easier. I think if you're able to do that, then you become very quickly indispensable because people are like, oh, it's pretty nice to have Kat around actually. Job has been better since, Kat is around. So I think that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. And I like that because that feels something that's a little bit more approachable and maybe less stressful for interns being like, oh, I gotta be perfectly, equipped with all the tech skills and all of that. Like you actually don't. Talk to me a little bit about, obviously you've done the program. What are a couple things that kind of like stuck with you, since you've done the program?
I think that like the professionalism aspect of that definitely stuck with me the most. I think that a lot of people going in post-grad are not used to being in the professional workforce. And I think a lot of people don't know kind of like the norms and like the unspoken rules of that environment, obviously, or doing like the courses where it taught you that definitely helped. One thing that I absolutely had a great time with was the mock interviews. My mock interview was with Tim Young, and it ended up just being like a conversation. I was like, I mean, it's like, when you go into an interview, it's like you want to like work someplace, I hope, where you enjoy the people that you're working with. So it's like that's the first impression. It's like dating, basically, like speed dating. Like you go in and if you vibe with this person, then it might work. That's just one part of it. But if you don't have the connection, and then they're not going to want to hire you. So.
Of course, and shout out to Tim, who's an amazing recruiter and human being that's been mentoring our participants. And I think you're right. I think those moments to be able to like talk to senior recruiters in the program, specifically at mock interview session, is so, I think, life changing because, it really is an art form to learn how to interview, to learn how to pitch yourself, but also to understand like the subtleties of it, right? How to read it. Was that a good interview? As you said, like, did I vibe with that person? And do we think that,
Yeah.
because of course, as an intern, it's going to be more about cultural fit and kind of vibe check more than necessarily like a crazy amount of tech skills as we were talking about. So it's really great to see that this is something that stuck with you. Talk to me a little bit more about, I think you kind of like went to university, right? And then kind of took a little bit of a pause and then like started joining the program, getting back into this industry, which is obviously you were working in production, very, very fast paced type of industry. So tell us a little bit about how did you handle, work-life balance. I think this is a big question for a lot of people entering those industries. They're very, very intense sometimes.
Well, I think that like using a lot of the soft skills again that you have learned from like working in other types of jobs, like something like in the service industry or retail or something like that. I'd say production itself is when you're more of like a junior level position, like a PA, production assistant. I think that that's very similar to doing something like that. It's more about like it's about anticipating people's needs and being there to assist in like literally whatever way you can. So, I mean, there's been shoots where like I was just getting water. There was a shoot where I got to be like the script supervisor. So it's just like being
Wow.
ready for whatever, it really is just about like using those soft skills and being able to kind of just assess people's needs also. And then to your point about the work-life balance, sometimes, I mean, it does feel like you really don't have any, but I think like it's like you're working in something that you love doing. And I think that also inherently gives a lot more of a work-life balance to you. For me, it's like I would use my Google Calendar to like carve out like a lunch break, and like everyone who was on my company, they could all see your calendar, right? And I was like, here's my lunch break. It's like this is like the hour of my day where I'm
Yeah.
just like
Do not talk to me.
yeah, and then people wouldn't schedule meetings during that
Yeah.
time. So yeah, and it's like also drawing boundaries is also really important
Yeah.
too. Knowing when your workload is full, knowing when you're at full capacity is also a really important part of that too.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
And that's something also that you need to learn how to communicate. We have a lot of training now with ArtBound in the curriculum about kind of how to, bring in difficult topics like boundaries and like how to also manage your workload and how to communicate to your supervisors that your workload is full. Because it's true that
Yeah.
if you don't over communicate on those types of stuff, your supervisors might not realize and then they might overwhelm you with a lot more, but it's just because they're not micromanaging you and necessarily understanding what's on your plate. So I think it is really important as you go through, specifically in the beginning of your career, how to deal with that without sounding like you're not willing.
So I think what I learned was kind of going to your supervisor and like going to that person who, and this is something that ArtBound talked about all the time. It's like going to that person who's just one step above you and saying, hey, can you give me some advice on like, do you know how long this is going to take me? Or can I get some assistance on this? Or is there any advice you can give me? Like, it's not even just being over communicative in the sense where you're drawing a boundary. It's also just like asking questions and making sure that you're being over communicative or they're being over communicative with you as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you're saying this because I feel like a lot of people struggle to ask questions because they don't want to bother when
Yeah.
actually asking the right questions is so crucial, specifically for interns. Like it's your duty to be asking questions. Like you should be asking questions. It's not optional almost, right? And I feel like it's probably because you also asked the right type of questions that you became, probably such a, I guess, an important player in the team for them, right? Because you were also sharp in understanding like when to ask and when to get advice. So I think that was very smart on your end to kind of approach it this way, and
Right.
probably also saved you a lot of like hurdles of like feeling overwhelmed and feeling overworked, which is a reality in those industries sometimes. So, really appreciate you, Kat. I loved, all those advice and thank you for being so real and obviously like generous as well with like your story and, the things that worked for you because I think it's so helpful for people to also like, hear different paths and like, yeah, understand what worked, right? And it's not the magic formula for everybody, but
Right.
but I think it certainly doesn't hurt to kind of hear like some of the best practices that you that you had and that you resulted in the growth that you've had. And we're so proud of you, obviously, for being, part of the crew, and now also for being, as well in our team in Chicago, which is amazing. Now you've joined it as well as like our Chicago program coordinator and helping to facilitate our community and foster our community in Chicago. So we're super thankful, for you. And thanks again so much for sharing your time. Any final words of advice or anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up the convo?
I think that I would just say, be yourself, and just, yeah, remember that, you like are enjoying what you're doing, and just get excited because this is like the first step.
It is indeed. Thanks, Kat. You're awesome. Really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you, Laura.